Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to the Gwent Police and Crime Panel meeting of the 31st of January 2020. Welcome everybody to the meeting. We'll start off with some introductions. If I start to my right.
I'm Catherine Forbes-Thompson, the lead officer to the panel.
Charlotte Evans, Democratic Services.
Good morning, Pam Kelly, Chief Constable of Gwent Police.
Good morning, Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Good morning all, Darren Garwood-Pask, Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer.
Good morning, Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Sian Curley, Chief Executive to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Peter Nuttall, co-opted member.
Peter Clark, member for Monmouthshire County Council.
Good morning, Colin Mann, Vice Chair of the panel.
Oh.
Councillor Jez Kirby, Caerphilly Council.
Councillor Chris Forehead, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Councillor Mark Spencer, Newport City Council.
Councillor Jason Jordan, Newport City Council.
Councillor Tony Eason, Monmouthshire County Council.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon Cook, new member of the PCC Office, Communications Officer.
Roger Guest, Head of Communications and Engagement, the Commissioner's Office.
Joanne Regan, Head of Assurance and Compliance for the Commissioner's Office.
Mike Jeremiah, Councillor for Torvine.
Councillor Emma Repier, Torvine County Borough Council.
Councillor Lisa Winnett, Blaenau Gwent Council.
Councillor Jonathan Millard, Blaenau Gwent, County Borough Council.
Thank you all. Jill Howells, Chair of the Police and Crime Panel. So, first item on the agenda then, declarations of interest. Any declarations to declare, please? No? Okay, As called, thank you very much. Item 2, apologies for absence. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Bill Routley. He has a very valid reason. He's actually on his honeymoon. So I'm sure we'd all extend our congratulations to Bill on his recent marriage. As actually shown in, was it in the South Wales Argus? I believe there was a photo of the wedding as well. So that was lovely to see. So as Councillor Winnett suggested, we'll pass on a letter sharing our congratulations on his recent marriage. Any other apologies for absence? No? Okay, thank you very much. So moving on then to the Gwent Police and Crime Panel held on the 16th of December 2019. It's not long since we were all together before Christmas. So working through the minutes then, so we'll take any issues or matters arising at the same time. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, and page 7. Okay, thank you very much for that. Would anybody approve the minutes, please? And a seconder? All in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4. So this is a new topic that we've got for the panel then for 2020. We agreed the procedure in December, and it was to allow panel members to put forward questions to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, but to be able to do it in advance, not as a reactive question, but based on what people might have seen or discussed, maybe seen in the media, and something they felt was appropriate looking at Gwent Police as a whole. My questions first. So my question was regard to, we've seen many reports in the press recently about the abuse of police officers on duty, so particularly physical abuse, which can result in both physical and psychological harm. So what is the position over the last 2 years with regard to officers and staff being absent from work and for receiving compensation for such abuse? And how are you ensuring, Commissioner, that the Chief Constable is managing the welfare and return to work of those officers affected by such abuse? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Assaults on duty are a matter... Start again. Thank you very much, Chair. Assaults on duty are a matter which concerns me greatly. You may be aware that I campaigned for the introduction of legislation which introduced harsher sentences for those who assault emergency workers. That was the private member's bill by Chris Bryant, MP. That legislation was passed in 2018. Now, my team and I have flagged concerns that there is underreporting of assaults and subsequently linked absence may not be captured. This concern is shared by the Chief Constable, and as a result, officers and staff are encouraged by Gwent Police, the Police Federation and Unison to make sure that they report any assaults on duty. Now, there have been 517 recorded assaults on police officers and staff over the past 2 years. The main reason for the discrepancy between this number and other data is an issue regarding human resource form submissions. This is known by the force and is being addressed. When an officer is assaulted, it should be recorded as a crime and an injury on duty form should be completed. Many officers are not completing the inquiry on duty form. This is being checked, and the 2 LPA chief superintendents are being notified when reporting does occur. However, there is a current gap between the 2 data sets. Also, for the purposes of health and safety and recording assaults at work, there has to be physical contact, bodily contamination, e.g. spitting. This is different to crime recording, which could include harassment, for example. There has been particular focus on this issue at the People and Diversity Board, chaired by the Deputy Chief Constable, and other force meetings over the past 12 months. My Chief Executive attends this meeting in order to monitor and scrutinise this work. In future, this area of work will be reported to the Operational Efficiency and Effectiveness Board, chaired by the Assistant Chief Constable. The forms which individuals are required to complete following any incident are scrutinised by the Superintendent, who leads on operational support to identify any trends or areas of concern. These are reported to the appropriate board. The numbers of assaults on duty are also reported to me via the Force Performance Report to my Strategy and Performance Board, and the Chief Constable provides me with information on assaults and her actions to deal with them at our one-to-one meetings. I am reassured that the Chief Constable contacts those who suffer serious assaults in the line of duty personally in order to provide additional support to the officer following any assault on duty. This includes referrals for trauma risk management support, assistance from the Occupational Health Unit, and access to Care First, the Employee Assistance Scheme. Panel members received a presentation on this provision as part of the presentation on well-being previously. Now, in terms of the specific question, over the last 2 years, 16 police officers and staff required time off work following an assault. Return to work plans are dependent upon the injury sustained. This could be on full duties, restricted duties, or a phased return with support from supervisors and the organisation more generally. There have been 3 employer liability claims relating to assaults on duty since 2017, 2 of which were accepted and paid. A review of injury pensions is ongoing and due to be reported on by the end of the financial year. 2 initiatives that are already having a positive impact on numbers of assaults include the use of body-worn video and the use of taser. You may have seen in the press recently that I have the opportunity to bid for funding to increase the number of taser-trained officers, which the Chief Constable and I have agreed we will do on an incremental basis over the next few years. The impact of these initiatives is difficult to quantify, but anecdotally, it is felt that they do make a difference.
Thank you. It's interesting, those figures are actually, in terms of the time off following assault, are lower probably than I'd anticipated. And I guess this is there expectation amongst officers that you do expect to get either verbally assaulted or whatever during the course of the work, the nature of the job. So I guess in terms of reporting, it's underreported because of their expectation in delivering the service. And it's how you improve that and work on that, isn't it? But that's really interesting. Thank you very much for that full response.
Just on that point that you make, yes, there are issues. Some officers see this almost as business as usual. We want to remove that approach and to make sure that we do have an accurate picture of assault. Maybe the Chief might like to comment on this point, with your permission, Chair.
So thank you for bringing this issue up, because it's something that's close to all of our hearts in terms of making sure we protect our staff. And in terms of the submission in form in the organisation, if you like, as to what assaults take place, some officers, if they're pushed or shoved, will not submit a form because they feel it's bureaucratic. So some of these submissions are everything from a push right through to a fractured jaw or a fractured arm. So what I am doing is encouraging every single incident where an officer feels that there's been use of force, that they have been assaulted, that they ensure that we're informed about that. And the why is because we need to understand what risk our officers and staff face every day. So as a result of some of our analytical work, for example, I know that many of our assaults in the last 12 months were at custody units against some of our custody detention officers. And as a result of that, we have equipped our custody officers with body-worn cameras as a deterrent, but also to capture the evidence so that we can bring offenders to justice. So it is about being intuitive, providing the support, but also providing people with the right tools to try and prevent further assaults from happening. And the Commissioner is absolutely right. I speak to every member of staff that is assaulted, generally by telephone, to make sure that we are bringing offenders to justice and also that they have the support that they need there and then, not a month or two later. There and then, because of course we know that when people are assaulted or under stress as a result of that, it has an impact on their working life and also their home life. So the sooner we intervene and provide that support, the better. And so we're watching this, meticulously, because if we haven't got officers in work and staff in work, we're unable to protect our communities. So we've undertaken a threat and risk assessment, which includes assaults against officers and staff, to help inform us as to how many extra tasers we may need, and also to feed into our officers' training, safety training, what are the common things that are happening so that we can equip our officers and staff with the right skills to protect themselves and communities. And happy to go into more detail about that if the panel requires.
Thank you very much. The next question now is Councillor Eason, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll leave the question as is read for response by the Commissioner.
Could you read out loud for the public, please?
Right, for the public's sake. Now, I would like to raise the matter of the potential use of live facial recognition technology by Gwent Police. Does the Commissioner have, or is he considering, a policy in the use of this facility by his Chief Constable? If he does, can he bring a report to the panel?
Thank you very much, Councillor Eason, for that question. Through collaborative work with South Wales Police and our shared Digital Service Division, Gwent Police has access to the licences, allowing them to use automatic facial recognition, or AFR. The Chief Constable has confirmed to me that Gwent Police is prepared to use AFR in the future if its use would help keep communities safe. Now, I'm fully aware of the sensitivities involved in the use of AFR, and I have been following closely the legal case involving South Wales Police and the use of AFR in other forces. As Gwent and South Wales share a legal service and digital service, we have benefited from the engagement which has already taken place with the Information Commissioner and Surveillance Commissioner. This proposal has already been considered by Gwent Police's Ethics Committee, and the outcome was that prior to the introduction of the technology, there should be a robust policy and procedure developed by Gwent Police, a recommendation that I fully support. Should the Chief Constable decide to implement AFR, I will be monitoring its use closely, and I would be happy to bring a report back to this panel once a formal decision on its use has been made.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm old enough to remember George Orwell's 1984. I also note that some authoritarian regimes across the world use it on a daily basis to monitor their public. So I have concerns that that policing should be by the consent of the people, for the people, not by the police authorities against the people. So I think it's got to be thought out very carefully whether we should use this. I understand yesterday that the Metropolitan Police have decided to use this. South Wales Police are using it in certain circumstances at football matches, I understand. But what does concern me is that South Wales Police take it on, Gwent Police take it on, for example, other police forces. It becomes a national surveillance scheme, and I do have concerns that we've got to keep the police as a consent by the people, for the people, not by total surveillance.
Thank you very much. Look, I share those concerns. I do understand them. I too have read George Orwell's 1984 on a number of occasions. I've never seen an episode of Big Brother, however, I'm pleased to say. I bow to your greater knowledge, Vice Chair. But on the serious point, yes, I mean, I would not want to see that type of approach used where it was actually being used to surveillance of the general activities of people. And I think it's fair to say that even if we wanted to do that, we'd have neither the resources nor the desire to actually carry out that type of surveillance. It would only be in occasions where we thought there was a genuine risk to the safety of other people. And I have to say that the indications are that that is supported by and large by the public. What may be helpful, Chair, be very happy to try and get a report on how the technology actually works, because my understanding is that if the face that they may be looking for is not recognised within 2 seconds, it is deleted. That is my understanding, but I'd be very happy to get details of the technology if the panel wishes.
Yeah, thank you. I think if it comes to a situation where you are looking to do that, then maybe a report to provide that information and satisfy members' concerns would be very helpful. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Tony for submitting a question. So obviously this is a stand-in panel item, so should you wish to have questions for the Commissioner for the next meeting, get your questions to Kath at least 15 days in advance. She's going to give you the date now, won't you?
28th of February.
By the 28th of February. Questions to Kath for the 28th of February. It's the first 3 questions that come through that meet the criteria of the procedure. Okay. Moving on now then. Agenda item 5, an update by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Chair. We've provided a written submission, and myself and my colleagues will be happy to answer questions on anything that's there, or indeed that's not there that you feel we may have missed. Just want to emphasise just a few of the issues that are in here. First of all, 1.4 on school exclusions. We did indeed have a very positive meeting. I was joined with Kirsty Williams, the Minister for Education at the Welsh Government, where we talked about the links between that and serious and organised crime, and particularly the impact of county lines. So it is something that Welsh Government are keen to work with us on, and is the subject of discussions at the Police and Partnership Board that we have now with the Welsh Government. I can also say that my Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, Larry Thomas, has met the safeguarding heads for local authorities very recently, so it's a matter that is shared. On 1.7, the issue of road safety, I do have to use this opportunity to praise the work of the crash detectives, which is receiving widespread support and praise for the work that they do, and I think helps to show Gwent Police in a positive light. 2.1 about the Survivor Engagement Coordinator, that's a new post based at Connect Gwent, attached to Blackwood Police Station, the Victims Hub. It's very much about developing a peer-led approach where victims of domestic abuse can share their experiences and support others who are going through the same process. I was interviewed indeed by the BBC on this matter. The interview hasn't been broadcast yet, as far as I'm aware, but it will be soon. Finally, on 4.4, the community centre in Maindy. I met with the members of the committee recently. Many of you will know Community House in Maindy in Cardiff. There is a Maindy in Cardiff, but this is Maindy in Newport, spelt differently. And I'm very keen to work with them, as is Gwent Police, to discourage the sort of shall we say, vandalism and antisocial behaviour that is bothering them and their clients. With that, I pause, except to say one of the things that isn't mentioned in there, of course, is the national work that's been going on through the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners that I'm very heavily involved in, particularly on matters like the policing settlement and the comprehensive spending review that was due a year ago, but is now likely to restart this summer.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the panel? Colin?
Thanks, Commissioner. My big brother comment was based on feedback. I never waste my time watching it. But no, on the cyber advice, we are told quite often that I think cybercrime is roughly about half of the crimes committed, and it's probably early days, but I wonder if there are any thoughts on how the news staff will be utilised once they come in. It may be early to ask that, but on the other hand, I'm sure yourself or the chief are planning ahead. I've got another one, but I don't know if you want that one dealt with first.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, just to be clear, there isn't a definition yet of cybercrime because it's the use of cyber in a whole range of other crimes, whether that's fraud, theft, spreading of indecent images, issues like that. But the indications are that about half of all crimes in England and Wales have a strong cyber element attached to them. So that's the issue here. And certainly in terms of businesses, it's very much about them protecting their financial resources and not being scammed into making unfortunate decisions and losing money. Now, in terms of, when you say extra staff, were you referring to uplift?
Yes, I meant the new officers. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that is a matter for discussion very much with the chief and myself about how they're to be allocated. That's a 3-year programme. But, sorry. Oh yes, which I will be referring to when we come on to the precept, but so the first 6,000 across England and Wales will be territorial policing, frontline policing. The monitoring of cybercrime, of course, is a specialist activity, specialist capabilities, and we need to make sure that overall we staff those particular areas of work appropriately, but I don't think we've got decisions yet on that point.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll await some developments, I think. On the school issue that you mentioned, those of us who are school governors, I'm sure will be very much aware of this, and knowing the problems that pupils excluded from school can cause. And I think one of the things that I've gathered is that if schools can be supported to keep the pupils actually in the school, it's a far better solution. I know one particular school I'm involved with as a governor has actually managed to do that, and it's a better solution all round for the pupils and everyone else, really. So I don't know whether that was part of your discussion, but I think that's where the concentration really needs to go.
Yes, with your permission, Chair, I will ask Larry Thomas just to comment, but I can say, yes, of course, you're right. Dealing with things like county lines, which is controlled by serious and organised crime, there's no doubt about that. It's not just a matter for policing. It's very much a matter for key partners, in this case, education. And that's why we're approaching it in this way. And we do need to work with schools because there is, unfortunately, irrefutable evidence that those young people who are excluded from school and not giving any meaningful activities are easy prey to those who wish to exploit them for county lines and other criminal purposes. But I'll ask my deputy to comment further.
No, absolutely, Councillor Mann. That's the intention is very much about working in partnership with our local education authorities and schools in particular to look at how we can safeguard pupils, ensure that those pupils are getting the most appropriate education, so those who can be maintained within the school environment should, and those who need to be educated through alternative means have the appropriate education and safeguards and the quality education that they require. But I think it's very much seen as building that partnership approach. I was very fortunate to address, as the Commissioner mentioned, all of the safeguarding leads from the local authorities across Wales, very much building, firstly, that evidence-based understanding around the impact on children and young people and the threat, but more working with our partners in education and schools to look at how we can put support mechanisms for pupils and teachers. And parents, actually. One of our big discussions yesterday was around the role of parents and supporting parents.
And one final one, Chair, if I may. It's relevant in a way to 5.11, the All Wales Policing Group. Just to report that, I think it was last week, the representatives of the police and crime panels met the Deputy First Minister, Jane Hutt, and it was a useful meeting. So it hopefully I'm going to raise the profile of the police and crime panels as well, because I think we're very much a well-kept secret, to be honest, for most people.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Firstly, just to echo the impact of the Crash Detectives programme, I think the feedback that it's getting, certainly in social media, that it's really opening people's eyes as to the impact of Gwent Police in that area, so it's really successful. In terms of that, you've mentioned in the report the recruitment drive. Obviously, you're looking to recruit your own officers, you're looking to recruit additional officers now through Operation Uplift. How successful are the recruitment drives being, and are we sort of confident that we're going to get officers in our area, that we will be able to use those monies to get officers on the street?
Yes, I will be referring in a bit more detail, Chair, when I introduce the precept debate as to how that's to be used. Certainly, there are two separate things. Operation Uplift is additional to our planned recruitment. And we have to keep stressing that, because some of the funding announcements from central government can confuse the two things. But there is a separation. So we do have our plans for recruitment anyway, and perhaps the Chief Constable might like to amplify that a little bit in terms of how that's being handled and the training that's going with it. And then we'll be beginning the 3-year programme of the Uplift, which will be about 164 additional officers for Gwent, which will take us closer to the totals that we had pre-austerity in 2010. Not quite there, but it'll be closer to it, which of course we would all welcome. There are issues for us to deal with, which are very practical, important issues. We'll have the new police education and qualification framework now in place. We have to make sure that new officers will go through that process, the planned ones as well as the additional ones. And as I will explain, and Darren will amplify no doubt, the monies that we have for all the on-costs being paid up front for the new tranche of 164 officers coming into year one. But I don't want to overcomplicate matters, so maybe the Chief... Sorry. Oh, yes, certainly.
Just a reassurance around the question about numbers of recruits. I've been sitting on the Operation Uplift meeting, the Forces meeting, and what we don't have an issue with is numbers of applications. What the work is ongoing about recruiting people that are sort of more reflective of our diverse communities in relation to protected characteristics and economically deprived areas. So a report is coming to the Commissioner's Strategy and Performance Board in March in relation to all the work that the force are doing to try and encourage people from different backgrounds to apply. Numbers aren't an issue, but that sort of representative of our communities is the thing that we're trying to concentrate on.
Thanks. That was actually my concern, is that are we getting the numbers through? You know, there's a lot of people to recruit. I understand we will lose people as we go through the process, but there is a genuine interest in applying for these jobs within Gwent Police, so that's really good to hear. Thank you very much.
Well,
Just to give reassurance around our plans as well, so including Operation Uplift increases, we already have our recruitment plans in place for until March 2021, where we know our Operation Uplift money takes us to. Beyond that, we have plans in place, and of course we'll see what the second phase of that Operation Uplift money provides for us. Our challenge is, as well as police officer recruits, is to develop some of our police staff as well. So we've just introduced a new cohort of police staff investigators, one of the first in Wales. And this isn't a substitute for detectives and experience. It is to allow us to have people who have the appropriate skills to help us monitor sex offenders, and also to conduct some, dare I say, some lower level investigations, so that we release our experience to deal with the more critical incidents such as child protection, rape and sexual assault and the like. So trying to make best use of our budget to recruit appropriately, and also to make sure that we recruit the right people with the right maturity levels. So in terms of new recruits, as you can imagine, we have a lot of 19, 20, 20-year-olds, 19, 20, 21-year-olds who want to join, which is great. But actually we need to make sure that we have people with maturity as well, so that we have a good balance of people within the service. And of course we recruit from our BME backgrounds as well. So there's a whole array of work ongoing to make sure that it's not just about numbers, it's about skills, people, and the experience that they bring into policing as well. But the great thing is, we have got hundreds upon hundreds of people wanting to join Gwent Police. And, you know, picking the best is the hardest, rather than looking for people to come and join us.
That's really good news. Really pleased to hear that. Any further questions on the update? Tony, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. This might develop as well on the precept comments, but you just mentioned about the numbers of staff. It's difficult to try and put these figures together, to be honest, but you also mentioned in there 67 whole-time equivalent agency staff. What sort of work do the agency staff do, and do we need to have that many agency staff, or should we have them in the complement of the establishment at the moment?
A great question, and one that we've worked through in terms of our workforce planning. So the majority of those agency staffs are our custody nurses. So where we have somebody in custody who may need medical attention, we either take them to hospital or we assess them in custody. And also the very thing that I've just mentioned around police staff investigators, they will take over from our agency staff, but provide us with a sustainable operational structure, rather than relying on, dare I say, agency work. And perhaps people who we're putting on 12-month contracts. So that's where those extra staff are.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the update, Commissioner. There's no further questions on that then, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So the next item is agenda number 6, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Budget Requirement and Council Tax Preset Proposal for 2020-2021.
Thank you very much, Chair. Clearly, this is an extremely important item, and I will want to make some comments by way of introduction, and my Chief Finance Officer, who obviously put together a lot of this work, will assist in terms of detailed questions and responses that there may be required. Now, as we trailed 12 months ago, I propose to you today a Band D council tax precept increase of 6.99% for 2020-21, which equates to an additional £1.49 per month, or £17.86 a year for the average Band D household in Gwent. This council tax precept increase, when coupled with budget reductions and efficiencies of £2.4 million and a contribution from reserves and efficiencies of and a contribution from reserves and committed funds of just under £700,000, balances my budget for 2021 and thereby enables me to fund statutory pay increases for existing staff, meet inflationary pressures and unavoidable cost increases, and most importantly, maintain my investment of around 170 new police officer posts, those are planned police officer posts, in Gwent since 2016 to protect the most vulnerable and also to bolster the front line to deal with such things as serious and organised crime. I must stress at this point that it's been an extremely difficult year with many things well outside the control of Gwent Police and indeed policing in general. There was due to be a comprehensive spending review in 2019. That was delayed because of Brexit considerations, and in the end we have a one-year rollover of the CSR, and a new CSR will be held beginning this summer. So everything has been very late indeed. And whilst it's true that my Chief Finance Officer, Darren Garwood, does his normal job very effectively, I must pay tribute to him on this occasion for the additional effort that he has had to put in, second-guessing what the Home Office may be announcing, coming up with realistic assumptions to enable the planning process to continue in a structured and coherent way. And I must pay tribute to the work and energy that he has put into presenting the papers that are before us today. Now, the Chief's budget bid was formally received and scrutinised at my Strategy and Performance Board on the 26th of November last year. The discussion that took place confirmed that the bid was compelling, honest and robust. You had the opportunity in the December panel meeting to have sight of the Chief Constable's bid and receive a presentation from her on her plans for the force to continue to deliver my police and crime plan and the Policing Vision 2025, both to the backdrop of continuing austerity, increasing unavoidable service pressures, policing more complex crime types, and policing in the digital age. I'm extremely thankful of the panel's finance subgroup who have also taken the opportunity to scrutinise the detail of my budget submission. Now, on Wednesday, the 22nd of January this year, the 2021 final settlement was published and received by virtue of a written ministerial statement. That came out too late for the initial drafting of the papers that came to you from my office. Detailed analysis was undertaken following the written statement, and updated medium-term financial projections, or MTFP, produced, of which hard copies are available today, and they have been provided to the Secretariat. Now, a brief update on the final settlements was circulated to members earlier this week, with additional briefing provided to the finance subgroup members. I can now confirm that the final settlement provided the following differences and confirmations to the budget report originally circulated. Operation Uplift core grant from the Home Office has risen from an anticipated figure of 1.464 million to 5.463 million, plus an additional 1.725 million of special grant if recruitment targets are reached. But don't jump for joy at this stage in terms of those increased figures. I'm going to explain things. Members will have read that Gwent Police's Operation Uplift target for the 31st of March 2021 is to have recruited 62 additional police officers, which is Gwent's share of the first tranche of 6,000 police officers nationally. Now, assuming that 4,000 police officers of the overall and initial 20,000 will be allocated to other agencies, such as the National Crime Agency, only 16,000 police officers will be allocated to territorial forces. With 6,000 in the first tranche, this leaves 10,000 police officers over years 2 and 3 to be recruited up to 31st of March 2023. Gwent's share is forecast to be 103 police officers of those 10,000, making a total of 165 additional police officers in Gwent through Operation Uplift. The assumption in the original budget report was that the Home Office would only fund the salary and direct employment on costs, such as national insurance and pensions, in 2021 of Gwent Police's first 62 police officers. referred to as 1.464 million in Appendix 4 to the original budget report, and that the funding of the consequential costs of recruiting additional police officers, such as investment in the estate, the fleet, ICT, training, equipment, and police staff to support them, would potentially flow through as government funding in later financial years as recruitment targets were reached. However, within the final settlement for this year, the Home Office elected to fund not only the salary and direct employment on costs of the 62 police officers, but also the entire consequential cost of the full target of 165 police officers. This approach acknowledges the significant upfront investment required in forces to ensure that these additional police officers become effective as soon as possible. I am advised that the Home Office has confirmed that the funding which will be received in 2021 matches very closely the anticipated direct and consequential costs of this significant recruitment exercise. Therefore, it appears that over the medium term, operational uplift is cost neutral, and therefore this funding, announced this year, is fully utilised and not available to offset existing pressures and financial deficits within the force. Hence, this accelerated funding has no impact upon the 2021 proposed council tax precept increase before you today. However, as some of the operational uplift funding from the Home Office has been received as a revenue stream, it must be targeted towards capital investment. Therefore, this funding provides an additional revenue contribution to capital and therefore will reduce my external borrowing requirements from 21-22 and beyond. The financial costs of this reduced need to borrow does affect the revised MTFP calculated, but not until the 21-22 financial year. This will therefore be addressed in the next budget setting round and subsequent council tax precept proposals, but I'll say a bit more at the very end. A word of caution, however, with Brexit uncertainty remaining, because we're only entering the period of transition now, coupled with the CSR 2020 and the potential impact of the funding formula review, only time will tell whether operational uplift will be truly cost neutral to forces. As anticipated in my budget report, the Police Transformation Fund has come to an end, and therefore the continuation of any existing programmes will have to be funded locally. This pressure has already been accounted for, such as the Early Action Together programme. Reallocations from local commissioners' budgets, called top slices, have gone up by £91 million, and I'm talking across England and Wales here, signifying the increasing cost of major national ICT programmes, which are ultimately paid for from reallocations from commissioners' local budgets. Now, pension grant has remained, but only as flat cash. This therefore confirms a shortfall for 2021 of £1.1 million, which is consistent with the last financial year and will be largely funded from reserves and committed funds and not council tax precept. It is hoped, however, that continuing pension funding will be resolved once the comprehensive spending review gets underway. Now, aside from the accounting treatment of the operational uplift funding, the next most significant change from the assumptions in the original budget report was that capital grant has been reduced by nearly 75% rather than remaining at flat cash. The impact reduces my allocation down from £459,000 in 1920 to £120,000 in 2021. For context, this equates to only 10% of next year's fleet replacement requirements, leaving, therefore, the majority of fleet replacement and the entire estate and ICT programmes to be funded from revenue contributions, reserves and committed funds, or external borrowing. English commissioners have been granted precept flexibility of £10 per annum. You will note that my proposed council tax precept increase for 2021 amounts to an extra £17.86 per annum, a difference of £7.86. However, members will recall that last year I was one of only 3 commissioners across England and Wales who did not take advantage of the 1920 additional council tax flexibility of £24 per annum, opting instead for an increase of only £16.69, a difference of £7.31. So they're pretty close when you look over the 2-year average. My approach to a more stable, long-term approach to council tax precept increases avoids roller coaster increases each year and reflects a figure based on a bottom-up budgeting basis, balancing the needs of policing against the affordability to local residents. Conversely, the final settlement did not confirm the following outstanding issues and risks, which remain unclear at this time and are therefore subject to further dialogue. These are the impact of changes that the Home Office wished to make to the funding formula used to allocate government funding to individual forces. This could see, in addition to only cost-neutral settlements moving forward, a £6 million reduction in government grant into Gwent from 22-23 onwards. This will be affected by a reduction of £2 million per year for 3 years. The process to access specific funding promises in the spending review announcements, such as the £30 million to safeguard children from sexual exploitation and abuse. The Serious and Organised Crime, or SOC work in Newport, to provide early intervention and prevention, community resilience and strategic communications. The Early Intervention Youth Fund project to tackle, along with third sector partners, the threat of serious violence to young people. Welsh Government funding for the All Wales School Liaison Corps programme, and Home Office and/or Welsh Government funding to address the disparity with English counterparts on the application of the apprenticeship levy, and members will know that that's a bit of an ongoing issue. Now, in terms of expenditure requirements, you will note in your papers the significant unavoidable financial pressures that we are facing. The police staff establishment has warranted growth of 45 whole-term equivalents to 746 whole-term equivalents. This was not clearly apparent during the 1920 budget setting round, as the ongoing programme of service improvement reviews had not concluded the correct levels of establishment in key areas. It must be noted, however, that the increase in roles represent a ratio of 1 new police staff role to 4 new police officer roles established in the past few years, and reflects the role police staff play in supporting the delivery of policing services to the public. The pay award for police officers and police staff in 2021 is 2.5% and remaining at this amount throughout the medium-term financial plan. In 2021 alone, this amounts to £2.3 million, and the continuing increase in police officer pension costs falling upon the employer, which I've referred to earlier. Other significant unavoidable expenditure increases are underwriting the loss of specific government grants in order to maintain services, and placing existing commission services, particularly around diversion and early intervention, onto a recurrently funded footing. Now, in relation to efficiencies, since 2008-9, Gwent Police has delivered nearly £51 million of recurrent cashable efficiency savings. In 2021, the force will deliver a budget saving of £1.85 million, and on top of this, cashable efficiency savings of £0.54 million. These will contribute to the investment in the additional police staff numbers mentioned previously, thereby mitigating the impact in my proposed council tax precept. Now, assuming an annual precept increase of 6.99% throughout the life of the medium-term financial projections, the current unmet recurrent deficit to 24-25 is still £4.96 million in the revised MTFP. This deficit remains even after taking account of operational uplift funding and costs, annual precept increases of 6.99%, and known future budgetary savings and efficiency saving schemes, but more about that at the very end. In addition to internally generated efficiency schemes, the force uses HMIC's value for money VFM indicators to identify where Gwent is an outlier in expenditure terms when compared to its most similar forces. The latest VFM indicators have been received, and the Staying Ahead programme is assessing where Gwent appears expensive against the average of its most similar forces to see what opportunities exist to deliver a new generation of efficiency savings. Now, from an economic perspective, Brexit uncertainty could have a significant effect on inflation rates and the weak value of the pound, particularly on commodities imported that the police rely on. Cost pressures has already been evidenced on ICT contracts, with major suppliers being based in the United States and therefore charging in dollars. Now, also taking into account external influences, on current financial forecast by 23-24, council taxpayers in Gwent will fund over half of the net budget in Gwent, thereby becoming the majority shareholders. Modern policing demand is increasingly addressed through non-visible policing presence, such as dealing with cybercrime, as the Deputy Chair alluded to, counter-terrorism and domestic extremism work, safeguarding work with vulnerable people, dealing with domestic violence, and tackling sexual exploitation. Therefore, expectation of the public for visible policing needs to be carefully managed and communicated. Austerity across the public sector in Gwent increasingly promotes policing as the last service of report. Investment in policing in Gwent needs to be viewed in the context of, for every crime averted or victim put back on the road to recovery, the economic contribution is often immeasurable. Importantly, from a policing demand perspective, the other three police forces in Wales are currently proposing council tax precept increases of between 4.5% and 7.85% for next year. Importantly, however, last year each of the other three Welsh forces' council tax precept increases were higher than Gwent's. Furthermore, from a local perspective, local authorities in Gwent are currently proposing council tax precept increases of between 4% and 7.95% for next year. I'm drawing towards a close, Chair. At this stage in the budget round, my budget report presented today has already highlighted that policing in Gwent is still faced with a number of risks, and I won't repeat those. But on the plus side, opportunities can be advanced in relation to co-commissioning services with partners, collaborative opportunities with other police forces, and legislative changes to give commissioners greater power to income generate. I do want to stress the importance of consultation. So I would like to highlight the results of my public engagement exercise, which saw a combination of an online survey coupled with face-to-face engagement, both suggesting an increase of £2 per month. The results were, for the online exercise, 355 people, or 55.5%, supported this, and for the face-to-face exercises, 781 people, or 73.2%, supported this. Combining these together, of the 1,707 Gwent residents surveyed, 1,136, or 66.6%, were in favour of an increase of £2 per month. But note, however, I am only proposing an increase of £1.49 per month. So, to conclude, I mentioned that we need to be careful about going forward. There are still, in terms of the year ahead of us, a lot of known unknowns. I've alluded to Brexit uncertainty. Things will become clearer as we work through the transition period. The comprehensive spending review will, I trust, be implemented and concluded. And from that will flow a number of issues like the issue of pensions, and of course then the police funding formula, which will follow on from the CSR. All of which means it is extremely difficult for myself and my staff and Gwent Police to predict with any accuracy what, if any, increase in precept may be proposed in 12 months' time. So I cannot give you any assurance on that at this stage, except, of course, that we will keep the panel informed of matters as they develop. I'll pause there, Chair. Happy to take any questions, and as I have indicated, my Chief Finance Officer will deal with further matters.
Thank you very much. I think that very clearly puts in light the circumstances that you're dealing with and the uncertainties of the funding that's coming through. We'll take some questions now. I know, Councillor Mann, would you like to start with your questions?
Well, as I said previously, Chair, I have posed a lot of questions to Darren, but I thank Darren for his time and his diligence in answering those. It's, and again, as the Commissioner mentioned, you know, the public of Gwent very soon will be paying more than the government, and a lot of people are not particularly happy with that because we're not getting income tax reduced, for example, to compensate for that. It's a very difficult situation, and there is uncertainty. But what I probably said much of this last year, but we are living in a situation where lots and lots of people are struggling. Our previous Prime Minister talked about people who are just about managing, and I think that's even more so now when you see the increase in people who are going to food banks, including people who are in 2 or 3 jobs who are still going to food banks. And you know, there is a lot of hidden sort of poverty in that way. So any increase we put on, however merited it is, however increase we put on, is increasing the burden on the people that I represent and my fellow councillors represent. The Commissioner mentioned the increases in council tax from the 5 councils in Gwent. Obviously, the higher the council tax increase from the councils, that actually increases the pressure on people. So it's not a case of saying, well, so-and-so councils put it up by so much, we'll match it. I think in a sense that's an argument for actually keeping ours down rather than putting it up. And again, my understanding is that the Welsh police forces are certainly in the top third, if not the top 10% of council tax levied across Wales and England. The vast majority of police forces in England are, in fact, going for less. Sorry, the actual the amount of council tax paid is less than any of the police forces. Some of that is historical. There are police forces in England that pay very little, or areas that pay very little, but that is the answer. That is buried in the funding formula, which people are often reluctant to re-examine. But I think that is my concern, Commissioner, and I know it's your concern. It is the burden that we are putting on the public. There are some public, like everything else. I would venture to suggest that most people in this room can certainly afford the increase. I wouldn't want to speak for everyone, but certainly I meet people. I'm sure we all meet people a lot of the time who certainly cannot. This is depending on whether you buy in an expensive car, this is the second or the third highest bill that comes into anyone's household after a mortgage, if people are paying a mortgage, or after car payments or whatever. It is certainly one of the highest bills that people have to find money for, and I think as a panel we have to bear that in mind before we agree to the proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members?
Do you want me to respond to that or wait? I don't mind. Thank you very much. Look, I share those sentiments completely. I'm very, very aware of the overall impact of pressures on the citizens of Gwent. I understand that it's between a rock and a hard place. I have to make sure that Gwent Police have enough money to provide an adequate service for Gwent Police, that the resources enable them to do that. So balance for me is the key here. What I cannot control, of course, is the money that comes to us from central government. I can control the precept, the balancing monies, and as you rightly remind us, over a period of many years, we're now getting to the stage, because of reductions from central government, that the money raised locally will more or less match it. I can't say it's a situation that I'm happy with, because in many respects it means that citizens are paying twice through their taxation to central government and then further again directly to this public service. But that's the situation that I'm in. It's also why we held a very robust communication process and consultation with the public. And as I mentioned, it's quite a robust sample that we had. It's one of the biggest actual consultations with people. And much tribute to Rodriguez and his staff who've arranged this, where it's quite clear that the majority were supportive of an even greater amount than I'm proposing. You are right when you talk about some of the English forces. There's historical reasons for it, the different levels of funding. Some are already at 50-50, but others take Durham and Northumberland, Northumbria. I'm a bit out of date there, old counties, where the local precept has always been a very small part of their budget. There are historical reasons for that. So they could almost double their precept and it'll still only be a small proportion. We are where we are, and that's the situation. And we're never happy to propose an increase, and it's only done so after a most rigorous process to make sure that we're fair all round.
May I come in there, please, Chair? Just to remind members, so the Chief's bid, absolutely honest, compelling and robust, and the way you can tell that is the original ask, if you cast your mind back to December, was a precept increase of 8.99% to balance the books. And when you went through the honesty of that budget, that's what the requirement was. But you'll appreciate what Jeff has just outlined around his absolute concern around the impact on local taxpayers. And I wear a fiduciary hat as well to every taxpayer. That's where we tried with all our might to reduce that budget down to 6.99%, that ask. That still leaves a budgetary deficit next year, because the difference between 8.9 now and 6.9 is £1.2 million. So we're funding that locally through increased efficiencies that I've brought to the Chief of over 500,000, and we've got to find recurrent funds through reserves, which is not the most sensible way to go for recurrent funds through reserves, of another 700,000 just to balance the books. And I think the important thing, the narrative we played out 12 months ago around a 6.99% last year, rolling through the MTFP, was to make sure the investment we've put in since 2016 was sustainable and maintained. So we've got a really, really robust, strong platform to move forward with the operational uplift officers. So the existing officers and the existing services are suitably supported. So we're not beg, stealing and borrow. The uplift officers that are coming in are joining officers who are already suitably resourced and supported through that. So I think it's just to re-emphasise we have already taken £1.2 million out of that budget ask through the precept.
Thank you. With regards to the savings you're looking to achieve, and so pages 86 and 87 refer to identified savings for 2021, and it talks about the £500,000 from the Staying Ahead programme in 2021. The identified savings, you're looking at over £1 million in ordinary overtime, bank holiday overtime, RTC overtime, etc. How robust are those savings when, if we look at page 66, whilst there's an overall surplus of 310,000 on overtime and enhancements, a lot of the deficit is actually against overtime. So how assured can we be that the savings that are identified in appendices 5A and 5B are realistic and can be achieved?
I'll start with this one. You obviously you're picking up through those appendices the places we're going to find the efficiencies. So you appreciate in the journey of investment in police officer numbers, we've had a number of officers who are stretched to full capacity. You think about the utilisation rates. We talked last year about Newport officers at well over 90% utilisation rates. So that overtime has always been there as your safety net to keep delivering the service. But the times are so hard now, we're actually shining the light into those areas to see if there are savings. So you appreciate there's £1 million. That's a big ask. That's what we're asking the Chief. That's the sort of pressure we're putting on Chief. Maintain service, maintain delivery, keep a healthy, well-being workforce. We've got to try and find £1 million somewhere. So if I lay out that sort of pressure and context, it's probably helpful for the Chief to come and flip it to the pushback, I suppose.
So what does that mean for us? So the presentation that I gave in December outlined that even with the increase that we've talked about today, and of course not all of that has yet been delivered, that just takes us back to our police officer numbers to 2008. And yet our demand is increasing, as you know, not just in terms of number, but the complexity of that demand. So the cybercrime issues, the sexual exploitation, all of those things are increasing by the day, our calls for service. So what we are doing is trying to reshape that efficiency by making sure that we've got the right people where they need to be, by reviewing the operating model, the supervision where it needs to be, by reviewing all of that, so that we've got the supervision in place for our staff on the ground. That supervision, up until now, has been asking an awful lot of our officers to work on because we haven't had the numbers to meet our demand. The ambition over the next year, albeit the increase in staff, will be primarily young in terms of experience, young in experience. Our aim is, because we are increasing our numbers, because we are having police staff investigators and really bringing efficiency into the processes that we're trying to implement, that we will not have to put that extra pressure on our staff and ask them to work on. So we really are trying to look after our staff, but through the increase, try and reduce the overtime. In all honesty, it's a big ask. It's a huge ask because for me, what I want is a continuity for our public. So if you have suffered a crime, there is nothing worse than seeing a different officer pick that crime investigation up and updating you. I would rather there be continuity. But because we need to save money, we are going to need to make sure that those crimes are expeditiously dealt with, but we cannot expect officers to keep working 12, 13-hour days, which is why we're targeting overtime, not just to save money, but to actually for the well-being of our staff as well.
It's interesting, actually, then, that you pick up on that, because my next question was around... you didn't see my questions, did you? Page 52. So looking at the Peel assessment of the force, so you're looking at 1920's results. We've seen an improvement then to good in terms of force effectiveness, but actually when you look at the last Peel inspection, the extent to which the force legitimately keeps people safe has gone from good to requires improvement, and that talks about the ethical and lawful workforce. It talks about requiring improvement, focusing on stop and search. Obviously, we're seeing increasing crime. We're still trying to progress a situation where the panel have accurate and timely performance information. So, bearing that in mind, in terms of the pressure on officers that you've just referred to, how is this increase in precept actually going to ensure that come the next precept review, we're in a position where we've seen an improvement, we have reduced overtime, and actually we have officers that are supported and actually better able to deliver their services?
So, a great question, really. So, what I'm delighted about is that when we made the investment last year, as you know, we put an awful lot of reshaping into our organisation and service delivery. We have seen an increase in terms of our effectiveness, that's what we're here for, is to be effective. So in terms of how we deal with domestic abuse, serious organised crime, and of course the supervision in all of that, and some of our work has been hailed as good practice. So that is absolutely superb. The legitimacy issue is about the fact that we weren't monitoring, ironically, use of force. So the very issue that we've just mentioned around officers that have suffered force and have had to then use force in order to manage people is an area that we need to improve upon, because in all reality officers haven't had the time to put those forms in. So it's a knock-on effect in terms of us really understanding what our staff are dealing with. The legitimacy issue is also about vetting, to make sure that we speed up the vetting of our staff and those people who come to work with us. That is now in hand, and I have great confidence that we will deliver on that over the forthcoming year, and that will be represented in the Peel inspection. What I'm keen to do is to make sure that our effectiveness does not go down because of us not allowing people to work on and the like. Our presence in the community, neither should that be reduced. So, if I need to come to you and say I need some money from reserves because I'm not putting the community at risk, but I'm not keeping work in the same offices all of the time, then I will. But I think it's good to set this goal, because we do really need to reduce that number of overtime for the welfare of our staff. But we will monitor it very, very carefully to make sure it doesn't have an impact on our effectiveness and, of course, our presence in the community. And with that, we're really working hard to make sure that prevention, so that we're reducing crime, and really dealing effectively with the causes of crime, is our focus for the forthcoming year.
Thank you very much. It's a huge ask and it's a huge pressure for the force. Thank you, Darren. Obviously, we'd echo the Commissioner's thanks to Darren for all the work he's put into the finance. One of the things that the panel have thought would have been helpful would be, we talked previously about sort of the budget book view. So where is the money broken down over the services? So how much is spent on CID? It would just give us some visibility in terms of where it is. So it's just an issue, really, if we could see it at some point. That's it. That's it.
Absolutely. I handed some to Councillor Mann yesterday. Absolutely. Okay. I've got 2 cuts of the entirety of budget. One by where the budget sits. Apologies. Two cuts of the budget. One around where the budget actually lies on local policing, central teams, support functions, etc. And another one by virtue of what we spend the money on: police officer salaries, police staff salaries, etc., etc. Councillor Mann had a pack yesterday. I have a pack here today. I will circulate them and keep that as a consistent message in future financial briefings, so you can see that theme emerge.
That'd be really helpful, thank you. Councillor Jordan's got a question for you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Going back to last year, where we had this £1 million floating around for the M4 relief road, and they said it went back into the capital reserves. Why couldn't we use that? Because now you've offset that £1 million already, to go back in. Because I know you were saying about a percentage is about £1 million. Why couldn't we use that £1 million, even though you've set aside it? Can't we use it for this year and then drop the preset? Because by looking, I've done a few calculations in Newport. There's a lot of social housing estates, and on a band B or C houses. Do you mean? I've looked and I've calculated roughly it's about £103 extra a year that somebody's paying on a band B for their council tax. That's including the council and the police precept. So I think with that bit of influence, by dropping it down, it could make a lot of difference to some people.
Yeah, I will bring in the Chief Finance Officer on the detail here, but I think in general terms, yes, it is true that we flagged up the 1 million for the anticipated decision on the Black Route, which we thought at the time was going to go ahead. That's not the case, but we did say that in the event of it not happening, then the money would go in to help to reduce the pressures on reserves. I have indicated that we are actually going to use the reserves on a number of occasions, and indeed the Chief just referred to making applications to the reserves. So it will be used for the overall policing services. A note of caution, however, when we talk about reserves, most of that is committed funds for major capital items so that we reduce any future borrowing requirements. The actual amount of money that is a genuine reserve in terms of what we sometimes call a rainy day fund. If a major issue occurs that requires a significant, relatively short-term investment by Gwent Police, it's only about £4 million. So we do need to be careful, and as the Chief Finance Officer said, dipping into reserves for revenue issues is not a good idea normally, although we are doing it to mitigate some of the cost pressure. But perhaps I could bring in Darren further.
Thank you, Commissioner. Absolutely, Jason. Really good question, that. You recall last year I spoke about if it wasn't utilised, I'd use it to go into revenue contribution to capital. So that £1 million offsets us having to pay 3.5% interest on future borrowing, which has just got significantly compounded by virtue of our capital grant being reduced by 75%. So the problem's escalated. So by using the money to put into revenue contribution to capital, I'm avoiding interest charge of 3.5%. But also, that money in year, because of the planning operation we still had to put into the decision, I think we spent circa £600,000. So that £1 million last year was already spent on pre-planning work. So I'm left with this judgment of, do I use that money to offset future borrowing costs, which you'd appreciate as an individual, you get poor return on your savings versus a higher return, a higher rate you've got to pay on your borrowing. So what would you do? And we also got to be absolutely clear that the reserves and committed funds are being depleted very, very quickly. We presented the estate strategy at the last meeting, and you can see the ambitious piece around developing an estate that is professional, meets policing needs, is public focus, and is future-proof, the four pillars of the estate. So we're acutely aware that we need to ensure that the infrastructure to support operational policing, it's not generally about police officers, they need that infrastructure, that I need to be assured that money's around. So I get better bang for my buck through that, well, the policing buck, the policing budget buck, that actually ratepayers are paying for. I get better leverage by putting it through as a revenue contribution to capital and avoiding borrowing costs than in the other way. So I'm trying to make best use of that money by avoiding borrowing for as long as possible. But it's a really, really good question. I appreciate that.
Could I just add one thing? In terms of the M4, it is of course true that the First Minister has said no to the Black Route. However, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't going to be developments around the M4. Gwent Police is cooperating with the Burns Commission to look at other options that there may be, short-term and longer-term. And so there could well be additional costs impacting upon us as the year and next year unfolds. Also, of course, we do have the new conference centre at the Celtic Manor that is going to require extra resources from Gwent Police. That is happening. I attended a conference there a number of weeks ago. Very, very good facility, or at least it will be once they get the PA system working properly. But there are those pressures that are still going to be there, and we can't forget about them.
Thank you. Councillor Jeremiah, and then Mr Nuttall.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a question on the survey that you put out to the people saying whether they agree or whether they don't agree with the precept? When the council, when your tax came out, I went out and about in my area and in Torvine to do my job, and they told me a totally different story to what the your survey come out to, because I had very, very few people that said that they are prepared to pay the extra £2. Now, I did say £2, I didn't say 147, but like I say, the other one was reversed, very much so. I would have thought 90% said to me that they wasn't prepared to pay it.
Thank you very much, and I understand that. Rodriguez, my head of comms, may want to comment here on the mechanism of it, but I think what's important is that we engage with people at various public engagement events. We went to supermarkets, we went where people were, and we talked to people about it and also explained very carefully what the money would be used for. And the response that we had is an accurate and honest response that's been recorded here once people understood what we were doing. We too used £2. We didn't say £1.47, £1.49. That's come later. So people knew what we were suggesting, and we're confident that we have a robust response. With your permission, I don't know if Rodriguez would like to explain or expand a little further.
Yep, no problem. Obviously, Councillor Jeremiah, I can't comment on the people you spoke to, but I can tell you in the last 2 years since we brought in doing the face-to-face engagements, we've run about 50 in total, and we've consistently, across all roughly 50, we always run about 75% yes face-to-face, and I think it's 1 in 5, so 20% no, and then the rest unsure, and that has been consistent through the summer, through Precept last year, and through Precept this year. I would also say that because we've done it over such a long period of time, we've been consistently pulse testing, consistently asking people the question. So it's not just a go out and we do it in a week. We did it at 8 engagement sessions through the summer, another 25 through the winter months, and it's been consistent. I mean, so we're consistently getting about 75%. I do think there's an element of what we're doing as well, the purpose behind we're doing it. I go on a lot about purpose and process, and it's not, when we're out and about, we're not just trying to ask people the question. It's a multi-offer, which is why we've had cyber CSO with us a few times, Connect Gwent. So it's not just about going out and get a survey. We're speaking to people about their concerns, and we speak to people about the OPCC and its role. We've been giving out crime prevention information. So we did more than 2,000 people got crime prevention advice off us between October and the start of January this year. We gave 549 people got information about Connect Gwent when they mentioned things about victims. So we provided that kind of information as well. We signed people up to our channels. So we're not just out doing the survey, but like I said, through all our engagement over last year, through the summer and this year, we're always it's always about 75% say yes. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Nuttall.
Returning to the borrowing and capital funds, what is the situation on the historical external borrowing costs? Are they still what's going on, and how long are they going for, and could they be reduced to that's a drain on your resources?
We've been, since Commissioner's been in, we've undertaken no new borrowing. So the only borrowing we had in the system was the PFI finance lease liability, which we are terminating to drive savings out of that PFI scheme. So it's part of the narrative I have nationally with my colleagues and the Home Office around reserves and borrowing. So Gwent was always perceived as a high reserve force, but we had zero borrowing. So which is better? And then there's other forces with very low reserves and high borrowing. I know which place I would rather be. So there's no legacy borrowing. That's because we've had that prudent financial management over years around maintaining those reserves and committed funds, allocating them to the capital programme. So it's a bit of a new concept as we move through to 21-22. We've got to start borrowing. So my natural inclination is always to minimise that exposure. So I've got a legal duty around the Prudential Code and the Treasury Management Strategy, which is published and we bring here for noting every year. So fortunately, we're in a position of no legacy borrowing, because you're absolutely right. If I did, I'd be looking at my options with historically low interest rates at the moment around reprofiling and reborrowing. But unfortunately, it's hard to reprofile zero. But thank you for the question.
Councillor Winnett.
Thank you, Chair. Now, you've been talking, Darren, about the depletion of our reserves as well. What concerns me going forward, you say we got like 4.4 million in real-term money. God forbid we have an incident like April Jones. Do we have enough money in reserves to carry out, an intense investigation like that, or we have to go out and borrow a significant amount of money? God forbid an incident like that happens, but there's always a great possibility. And it concerns me where you were, saying that we're having a great depletion on our reserves.
Absolutely, very good question. I have a legal duty as a Section 151 officer to maintain a general reserve, and it's £4 million, and I can't touch that. And it does a couple of things, or three things. It acts as working capital, so timing of cash in and out the organisation, doesn't necessarily coincide with payday, etc. So it acts as working capital. But importantly, it's that emergency reserve. It's the reserve I keep, and I legally have to keep it on behalf of the Chief Constable. There is no set limit. It's down to local circumstance and local assessment. So it's currently 3% of our overall budget. And the point you make, it is referred to as the April Jones, or the SOAM type reserve. I think SOAM cost Cambridgeshire £8 million because that first 24 hours was absolutely. So I always have the pledge that the Chief Constable, God forbid we have something like that, isn't worrying about how we're funding it. It's about resource deployment. So I can never deplete that reserve. It's a separate statutory reserve that I monitor twice yearly. So I do it as part of this budget setting round, and I do it when I write the Treasury Management Strategy. So if you look at the reserves profile going forward, I'm still left with about £10 million at 24-25. So although I'm coming down from 53, so I talk about utilisation and depletion of reserves, but it's only to a very sensible level, and I've got a legal duty to maintain that.
Thank you for asking that question. I was involved in the April Jones murder because I was in David Powys at that time. And at that time, there were also significant increases in the number of murders that were happening across the force. So collectively, that brings a huge cost to the force, and the Home Office will not give an indication of how much they will support a force in those circumstances up front. And at that time, you've got to just get on with the investigation. Now, what concerns me is, and I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying here in terms of the impact on individuals who are paying for the precept. And absolutely, I have people in my own family that struggle to meet some of those bills. Ultimately, the 6.9 will just allow me to deliver the service that we have now and still need to find a significant amount of savings this forthcoming year and over subsequent years. And yet I know that will only take us back to those figures of 2008, with demand increasing, and I would be expected to come to this panel and give account on performance. So my concern is absolutely along the lines of what you're saying, is I'm touching wood because we've had a reasonably good run in terms of critical incidents, but that will never stay the same. All we need is either a significant incident or an increase in murders, which we're already seeing in Gwent police area. And that's not wanting to, provide fear to our communities because they're often domestic related or the people are known to them in terms of offenders. But that I do not want to investigate with one hand in terms of finance tied behind my back, because it means that I'm not able to deliver the best service that I can for the communities of Gwent at critical incident level and on a day-to-day level. And it's really important that we just think that if communities are safe and individuals are safe, then people and communities grow, and businesses are more likely to come to communities where there is a safe place for people to live, work and visit. And that's what we're working on in Gwent, really making sure that we're a safe community, which we are, but to retain that, we have to have an investment in public service and in particular policing. This isn't an investment, it's a standing still budget as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions for the office? Councillor Eason?
Yeah. Regarding the pensions, which Dan will probably answer, with the 2.5% increase for pay, you're assessing the fact that it'll be £429,000 extra for pension contributions in year. I'm aware that some local authorities are considering pension holidays. Are you considering pension holidays within the police force?
Not on the police officer side. So they probably talk about the LGPS side, police pension, the police staff side.
Well, there are two.
Yeah. So the police staff side, no. I believe it's a false economy, personally. Because you're hoping for a better settlement in the future. So we have considered it. We do have an appropriately funded police staff pension position. But the police officer side, we don't have that luxury. We fund it, we've got to fund it. So you'll appreciate that last year, because of Brexit uncertainty, markets like certainty, overnight, we got hit by a £3.2 million hit. Government grant came in for 2.8 million. We had a £400,000 shortfall last year. You recall I funded from reserves. Everybody's had a 2.5% pay award, so that pension gap has increased. We were hoping pension grant would increase suitably. It hasn't. They flat cashed it, so that gap is still £1 million. So it's one of these, I suppose, unfortunate, unavoidable costs that land that you can't really do as much. We just try to mitigate it. So our strategy is we do not pass that cost on to the ratepayer for the pension, because as I wrote in the narrative last year and this year, post-Brexit, markets may stabilise, markets will stabilise. When the actuarial does the revaluation of the police officer scheme in future years, the discount rate might be adjusted and that deficit might go away. So I'm almost funding it as a non-recurrent pressure over a period of time. So I'm using those dwindling reserves that you're covering all the bases. Because you remember many years ago, we started using a risk approach to reserve. So actually, if you provide it for every eventuality, you need millions in reserve. So you're almost spinning plates with your reserves at the moment and covering different eventualities. But I don't have that luxury, and on the police staff side, I don't favour that approach.
Can I add, in my opening narrative, I did mention that it is hoped that for the future, the issue of the police pensions will be part of the consideration of the comprehensive spending review. We have assurances that it will be considered. We'll wait and see. But hopefully we need not have this discussion again in future years.
Thank you. And final questions from Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. The Audit Committee in Caerphilly had the pleasure, if that's right, of listening to an actuary for a couple of hours the other day. But one of the things that came out of it is that pension holidays are not a wonderful idea, but, in his opinion.
I've been through
well, I just wanted to touch, Chair, quickly on the Commissioner mentioned the apprentice levy, and it has been going on for quite some time now. Just wondering if there was any prospect of any progress on that. And the other one is in the appendices. Note that this year we lost something almost 280,000 from the Welsh Government on Tarian. Whereas we quite rightly praise the Welsh Government for funding PCSOs, on the other hand, they have taken back a very large sum of money, as far as I'm concerned. And Tarian again was, is a vital operation to look at regional crime. So this, whether or not there's any possibility of maybe persuading them to restore at least some or all of that sort of money that is disappearing.
Thank you very much.
They did have a better settlement, didn't they?
Yes, thank you very much. On the apprenticeship levy, you're absolutely right. It's been dragging on a long time, and we need resolution. I have to say we are proceeding with the issues of the graduate apprenticeships, the higher education element. We had some special financial support from it from the Home Office and indeed the Welsh Government, but the actual issue of the apprenticeship levy is not resolved, although we have had indications that we're getting close to it. With the new government that's been formed, senior officials from the Home Office have suggested that a solution may not be far away, and we will keep lobbying them to make sure that that is the case, because it's an issue of fairness where in effect all the Welsh forces, not just Gwent, having to pay twice. We cannot allow the professional qualifications of Welsh police officers to drop below those of English police officers. That would obviously be a nonsense, and therefore we have to pay for it one way or the other. But we do hope we can get resolution of the apprenticeship levy. It's part of the problems of the devolution settlement. It's one of those areas that is unclear. Just to remind people, policing, of course, is reserved, whereas training is generally a devolved matter, and I used to be Minister for Skills, so I know how that works. But, of course, that doesn't include the training of reserved services, so why would it? So there's the dilemma. But we do hope, we have got indications now that there's a better approach nationally, and fingers crossed we'll get it sorted. On the issue of Tarion, yes, again, this is an issue the Welsh Government have funded Tarion over the years. It's gradually been reduced. They're not doing it now. Again, from their side, they were saying, well, it's not a reserved service, but there is a better understanding of the impact of serious and organised crime on Welsh communities. Those discussions are ongoing. We do hope that they will reflect upon support for Tarion. But as of this moment, it's as you've outlined. But discussions do continue, and indeed, one of the valuable things about the new policing board with the Welsh Government that we have, we can have a far more strategic approach to the funding of joint services, whether reserved or devolved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, members, for the questions that you've raised to the Commissioner and his team today. We will now adjourn the meeting to discuss the information that we've received and come up with our conclusion on the report. The meeting will be adjourned. The webcast will continue, so people may wish to leave the room for the duration. Thank you very much. And welcome back to the panel meeting. It's now reconvened. We're discussing agenda item 6, which is the Gwent budget the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent's budget requirement and council tax preset proposal. The panel have taken the time out to discuss the proposal and the information that we've received. The whole panel did not agree to veto by the majority required. So therefore, the panel have requested that you review the budget proposal that's been put forward today and look to reduce it to an increase of 6%. The reasons for this include the pressures on taxpayers, the better than expected settlement, and also the opportunity for less borrowing, which results in the ability to secure financial returns. So that was the outcome from the discussion that we've just had. That's the proposal from the panel. Could I have someone to second that proposal, please?
Yeah, seconded, Chair.
Thank you. And all in favour? Thank you very much. Do I open it back up for questions? Any comment from the Commissioners? Welcome.
Not at this stage, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, at the risk of repeating, I think we do all appreciate the amount of time and effort that has gone into producing this report, which contains a huge amount of information, as we know.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, agenda item number 7, the Gwent Police and Crime Panel proposal to join the National Association of Police, Fire and Crime Panels. I'll just pass over to Kath to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the panel who were here a few years ago in 2017 may recall we considered a proposal to join the National Association of Police and Crime Panels at that time. There was some there was some interest on the panel at the time in joining. However, there was no surety regarding any contribution to costs towards supporting the association. We subsequently found out that the panel grant which we received from the Home Office did not allow us to make any subscriptions to any such association, so we were unable to proceed with joining the association at that time. Since then, the association has formed. Not all panels across England and Wales have joined it. All 4 Welsh panels were unable to join it for the same reason as Gwent. Subsequently, the AGM in November, the association met and they considered this as a barrier to panels joining and decided to remove the subscription cost for panels to join the association. The chair has therefore written out to all panels across England and Wales to ask them to reconsider whether they would now like to join the association. So I'm just asking the panel to consider if they would like to reiterate they wish to join, and then I will contact the association on your behalf to ask us to be formally joined to the association. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Any questions from the members? Okay. Somebody to approve the recommendation then that we wish to join the National Association? Second? All in favour? Okay, thank you very much, Kath. If you could take that forward for us. Thank you. Agenda item 8 then, the forward work programme, please.
Thank you, Chair. The next meeting of the panel will be on the 20th of March 2020. We've got a few items already listed on there. We've got the crime prevention report, the estate strategy, the performance report, and that will be the actual structure of the performance report going forward, which the performance subgroup has been working towards. Then what we're looking to do in May, after the AGMs for all the local authorities, when we're sure of what the membership will be of the panel going forward, we will hold a workshop for all panel members to go through the performance framework document in detail. So all members will have a full understanding of how it's going to look going forward. And that will be a really important event, and I would encourage everyone to attend that. And then hopefully in June, we will look to have the Q3 performance management report. And then September, we would have the annual performance report as well.
Firstly, I'd just like to share my thanks to Joe Robinson and to my colleagues that have been involved in the performance subgroup and the commitment and enthusiasm they've shown to taking that forward. And I look forward to that workshop. I think it'll be very interesting, and given some of the discussions that we've had today and, you know, the talks about performance and how we can manage things and take it forward, I think it'll be vital in gaining everybody's understanding on that. Any other comments for Kath on the forward work programme? No? Oh, Commissioner?
echo my thanks for the work that's been done jointly on the performance report. I think we're making significant headway. There's a triumvirate, if you like. There's yourselves, the Gwent Police, and indeed my team. We value very much the input that's come from yourselves, and we look forward to producing the good structure that we're able to build upon for a longer term.
Okay, that brings to a close then all the agenda items for today. There's a ceremony later today. Thank you for the invitation to the new HQ ceremony. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend, but I understand some of my colleagues will be there, so best wishes for that. I'd like to thank everybody that supported the We're Red for Wales and Valindra today. There is an envelope going around, and I will make sure those donations are passed on, so I do appreciate your support on that. If there's no other matters or any other issues, we'll bring the meeting to a close. And we'll see you at the next meeting on the 20th of March. Thank you very much.